in my personal experience, if I go back to when I was in school, honestly, this stuff wasn't. It just wasn't really a thing. It
Yeah.
wasn't a thing. It wasn't. It wasn't a concern. At least not as far as I know. I'd never even dude. I'd never even heard the term white privilege until I was about. I want to say I first heard that term maybe when I was like 24, 25.
Yeah.
I'd never even heard that term before. And so the fact that they're now teaching people about that in universities, let alone in schools, is new and is concerning. So what you're dealing with is a little bit of a it's a new problem with old roots.
I mean, it's crazy to me to see how it's almost the same exact thing across the world, really, in Canada, the United States,
It's the
England,
Anglosphere. It's the Anglosphere. It's not the world. It's the Anglosphere. So you
but
just said UK, Canada, USA, Australia, New Zealand. It's primarily the English-speaking countries.
yeah, for sure. And I've seen it all across there, and how it's almost the same exact thing. It's very strange, actually, how it's
Yeah.
just a blueprint being used everywhere. And going along with that, I've just seen that there wasn't, for the schools that weren't good in the first place and they had very bad literacy rates, now they're even worse. I know I made a video the other day about how the school was teaching kids about black communism, which I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I think it was in Pennsylvania, and the kids had a 13% literacy rate at that school.
Oh,
And it's crazy to see because that's common nowadays, which is really, really bad because the indoctrination is replacing the what little education kids would get left out of um, even really, really bad schools that there were. But what was it like growing up either? Just completely different, I bet.
yeah, man. I mean, look, I grew up in the Middle East. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. When I was there, I went to an American school, so I was in the American schooling system from kindergarten up until fifth grade, and then I
Mm,
came to the UK. I went for boarding school here in the UK. I went to Oxford University and studied here. But when I was growing up, man, this just it wasn't a thing. All of this stuff, it was not a thing. These terms weren't being used. There's certain words now that I see people bandying around, and it's like these are new age buzzwords. These are new age ideas and theories. Never in my life was I ever told that there was a thing called white privilege, or that by being black I'm somehow generally just oppressed by society, let alone by white people, or I'm in some white supremacist society and this and that. All of these ideas, I did not grow up with them, thank God. And no one was trying to push them. No one was trying to push them on me either. I think, like yourself, I think even from a young age, I wouldn't have bought into them because I'm just not that type of person.
yeah.
But no, it's really a new thing. I mean, where I grew up in a truly diverse community in terms of ethnicity, race, religion, everything. I was in an expat community in Saudi Arabia, surrounded by people from the Middle East, people from USA and Canada,
Hmm.
British people, people from Asia, people from everywhere. Like my friends from the beginning, people I've known, family, friends, etc. It's just been a big mix of people. So that's one thing that I personally find disheartening when you've got people who generally call themselves progressives. I think a lot of what they do is deeply regressive, but these people who are trying to, reestablish this form of racial consciousness, shall we say, or going around telling white people, white kids even, that they have some sort of inherent privilege, or that people who are minorities, or I don't even use terms like people of color. Again, that's another new buzzword that they decided to bring in there, right? Like when I was growing up,
Yeah.
no one used that term, right? Pitting people against each other in these various ways, telling boys and men that they're somehow toxic and that masculinity needs to be reformed or whatever, telling boys they're defective girls, telling girls they're defective boys, telling men to be women, telling women to be men, and then saying that men and women are just social constructs. All of this garbage is new, right? It's
Yeah.
new. Like I said, if you go back, lots of its roots go back to the Frankfurt School, postmodernism, critical theory. Lots of these ideas they stem back to several decades ago, but they used to just be fringe, weird ideas which no one like knew about or took seriously. But it's concerning when you're seeing this, as you've said, um, invading everything, right? Invading
Yeah.
everything, especially. especially when it gets down to stuff that impacts children, right? Because
Yeah.
that's when it's even more insidious, right? When you're telling me that you attended a class in school on white privilege, I'm like, geez, man, if I were like if I were a parent who had a child at that school, like regardless of my race, whether white, black, like mixed, whatever, I'm having words.
Yeah.
I'm having words, because that's not a healthy way to, like you said, it's indoctrination. It's indoctrination, and if you do want a healthy, happy, cohesive society with functioning people, growing, having the youth grow up into functioning adults
Yeah.
who actually get on with each other and who actually like are going to be successful, and are going to be productive human beings. These are not the ideas you want to be indoctrinating them with, right? And also, especially, even worse, you're doing that at the expense of true education.
Yep.
You're doing that at the expense of true education. So, like you mentioned that school where people are not passing basic literary tests or maybe basic mathematics tests, but you're there telling them about some made up nonsense about race and gender and sexuality or whatever it is. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that class I had was in 2019, so it wasn't even as bad then. It still wasn't good at all. But, after that year passed, my dad and I actually got rid of that class. We talked to the principal, we got rid of it. And then it comes back a year later when I'm now in high school and my sister's in seventh grade. But now it's worse. They have a class called social justice class where they talk about this
Really?
stuff. Yeah. I mean,
Okay, whose idea is that? Is that who's teaching this? Is this like a specific teacher? Because I imagine this is probably like a handful of individuals in the school who are pushing this stuff.
it is. And it's mostly the principal, actually. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, the principal.
Sounds like South Park.
Yeah, it does.
PC principal. I just got that into
And
my head.
I mean, it's exactly like that. It's funny, but it's terrible,
Yeah,
and how it is mostly I've noticed in a lot of these schools that I've looked at, it's the principals doing a lot of it.
interesting.
In fact, I'm homeschooled now, but just a couple months ago, I was in a public school. Of course, it was all virtual, and then I saw that the principal was wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt for
Interesting.
no reason, and so was one of the teachers. But
Okay.
it just shows to me that a lot of the principals are pushing this sort of stuff.
Out of curiosity, can I ask if they were white?
The teacher was
The teacher was okay. The principal's what?
Hispanic.
Hispanic. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Interesting. I had a suspicious feeling that probably neither of them were black.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's one of the ironies of this whole thing.
Exactly. And in fact, the private school that my sister goes to that has all the social justice stuff, it's almost 100% white. So I mean, it's just it's funny to see. It's
It's that guilt. It's that
yeah,
guilt.
exactly.
Yeah, it's that guilt, man. The most vehement Black Lives Matter supporters I see are white. Like,
Yeah. I mean,
even in the UK, it's the same. It's the same
yeah.
thing. The same
It's
thing. They all want to give me lectures and stuff as if they don't realize, like, it's like they just realized last year that Black Lives Matter. It's like, uh, thanks for the lecture. I've kind of been aware of that my entire life.
yeah,
Sort
yeah.
of, I sort of assumed that my life mattered, and my brothers, my sisters, my parents, like lots of my friends. Like, I figured, yeah,
Yeah,
I don't need
exactly.
affirmations on
But I mean, yeah, it's just crazy to see how all these white people like telling everybody else what to do.
that. Yeah, they don't, and they don't see it. They're so far on their high horse.
Yeah, they think they're virtuous.
Yes, those are the type of people who will call me a white supremacist to my face with no, without a tone of irony or.
I mean,
I don't know. Like, fortunately, I only have to deal with such people in a very minimal way, and I sort of feel for people who I'm kind of self-employed, and I kind
yeah,
of do what I want and associate with who I want. So I don't have any of this stuff rammed down my throat, and when I encounter it, I can mock it.
yeah, yeah,
I
exactly.
can mock it and batter it into the ground with no negative consequence. But I do feel for people like yourself who are sort of in the system. I mean, you're being homeschooled now, but anyone who's in a situation where they're in school or they're in university or they're working at a certain workplace or whatever, where these ideas are just kind of running riot.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I don't think they're I think a lot of people have been brainwashed. I think that's ultimately what it is, which is the truth is, and this can be difficult to understand sometimes, but most people do mean well. Most people do want to make the world a better place, or there aren't a lot of people who are malicious and they wake up every day thinking, okay, I want to make the world a worse place. It's like
Yeah.
that's not that common, but there are a lot of people, especially people who get possessed by some of these ideologies, especially more so-called progressive types, is they get brainwashed into thinking that this is the way forward, that this is good, and that you know, going online and berating black or non-white people who disagree with them is the way forward, rather than sort of listening. Um, and a lot of times, people like that, they do tend to be people, in my experience, who do actually, they project all the time. They project all the
Yep.
time. The people who are there calling everyone else racist, calling everyone else sexist, calling everyone else all types of phobics and isms, they tend to be the people who hold those ideas, and I think they project that onto everyone else. So, I mean, look at people who even propagate some of these ideas. I mean, you must know who Robin DiAngelo is,
Yep.
right? She's probably one of the most racist people in America.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
and because she assumes that all other white people, all other white Americans, and all other white people in general have the same prejudices
Yep.
and biases and weird things going on in her head that she does. And it's like, no, woman, like you are projecting. Like, that's on you.
Yeah.
That's on you. That's not how like, I don't know how many white people are there in America, over 200 million. Like, you're not representative of all of those people.
Well,
You've just got your weird ideas, which you're entitled to. Everyone's entitled to
yep.
weird ideas, but don't go indoctrinating and brainwashing people into thinking that your weird personal ideas are actual facts, and there are undebatable facts, right? There are some people
Yeah.
who are just like, white privilege exists and that's a fact, and I'm like, no. Right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, no, you can't just, and or if you're going to make that claim, you'd have to broaden it so far to just say that, okay, look, everyone, if you're going to say that everyone has various forms of privileges and disadvantages, then okay, right? If there's white privilege, then there's black privilege, right? If there's then there's Jewish privilege and there's Asian privilege. If there's tall privilege, then there's short privilege. If there's male privilege, there's female privilege. Like, if you want to go that far, we could say, okay, yeah, all of these things exist in various ways. There are different situations where, if we are out in the hot sun and it's 40 degrees and the sun is blazing, hey, you know what? I don't need sun cream. Is that black privilege? Right? If you get it, right? Is
I mean, I don't
is
know.
that black privilege? Right? You see what I mean? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
is that black privilege? Right? And it's just like, or maybe there are some situations where, like, I was talking about this with someone, and they were like, because they mentioned something like tall privilege, and I was like, yeah, well, there's also short privilege, right? And they're like, oh, Zuby, shut up. I was like, no, like, what about if you're on an airplane, right? Do you want to be
Yep.
tall or do you want to be short? Right? It's better to be short. If you're at a music concert, it's better to be tall, right?
Hmm.
if you're a,
Exactly.
in fact, if you're a woman, it might be better to be more on the short end. If you're a man, it's better to be more on the tall end, right?
Hmm.
It's actually harder for really tall women to date, because women generally want to date guys taller than them. So if you're a shorter woman, you've kind of got a bigger pool.
Yeah.
If you're a taller guy, you've got a bigger pool, right? If you're a
Yeah.
guy and you're 5'4", that kind of sucks in terms of women. Like, some women just won't be interested because of your height, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
If you're a woman who's 5'4", cool. No guy's going to be like, oh, she's too short. Like, cool, fine.
Yeah.
So, there are pros and cons to everything. There's advantages to being male in society. There's advantages to being female. Absolutely. I mean, number one, you live for 3 to 4 years longer. Like, there are plenty of things that we can talk about here. But when people hone in on very specific ones, and they don't want to widen the conversation and talk about anything else, that's when they're using it as an ideological weapon, right? That's when
Yep.
they're using it they're using it as a weapon. They're using it as a club, trying to guilt people, shame people, control people. So I just recommend people just flat out reject it.
Yep.
Like, big up to you for speaking up against this thing in your school, because that's what people need to do. Like, people need to just stop taking. People take too much BS.
Yep.
Like, for
Yeah.
lack of a better
Yeah.
term, like people just sit there and they're like, okay, let me sit here and attend my white privilege class and not say anything. And I'm like, dude, I'd be in there flipping tables. I'd be
Yeah. Yeah. Especially the
like,
parents. The parents take
yeah,
so much of it and don't do much with it. I mean, there are some parents that are doing good. In fact, one Canadian student just emailed me about some of the stuff they're seeing in their school, and she's standing up and doing stuff, and her parents are helping her.
okay,
So, there's some parents that are doing good, but after me making 130 plus videos on this stuff, just trying to show people how much of it there is, there's still a lot of people that deny it. And I think a lot of parents and grandparents that deny it because they don't see how bad it's gotten within the past 5 years.
sure,
So I don't think that they think it's actually that bad.
yeah.
You know?
That's always the case, man. That's always the case. People are very bad at people are very bad at seeing things until it impacts them directly, right?
Yeah.
People are very bad at sort of, I don't know. This happens with a lot of situations, but people often just kind of are apathetic until it impacts them directly, right? Until it's really, really in their face. So you can warn people about things, and you absolutely should, but you also have to understand that just most people, also people are just busy. People are busy, and people
Yeah.
tend to, you know, put things as lower priority or whatever, and they just think it's nothing, or they assume also, because the thing is, schools have authority, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if something is in a school curriculum, their natural assumption is that it's a good thing, right? Just
Yeah.
because schools kind of have that authority. It's like, well, if it's in this, if the teachers want you to learn it, like, it must be good, right? Like, why would they
Yeah.
want you to learn something that's not good? And 90% of the time, that's kind of true, right? I'd say that there's a lot of things you could change in the curriculum to make it better, but even if you're learning things that I think are kind of pointless, like, different types of dinosaurs, then, at the minimum, it's not harmful. It's just knowledge. But if it's ideological, and not just ideological, but this is as far as I'm concerned, this is I don't like the word toxic because it's kind of overused, but it is a toxic, parasitic ideology. It's not one that makes society better. It's not one that
Yep.
makes people better. It's not one that makes people get on with each other better. It doesn't make people. Um, it doesn't make people more successful. It instills in them either an unwarranted guilt complex, or an unwanted superiority complex, or an unwarranted inferiority complex, etc. Because look, all these people talking about white privilege, white privilege. It's like, okay, well, I'm a black guy. Like, what does that mean? You're telling me that, like, every white person is just inherently privileged above me in society? Do you want is that the message you want to send out to, like, black children?
No, you
That
don't
doesn't,
want to.
right?
No.
Is the message you want to send to white children that they have some sort of inherent advantage, or that they're somehow oppressors, and that they are, like, I'm just like, I don't see how this is helping anybody. Like,
It's.
as far as I know, most people your age, most people my age, whether you're 15 or you're 34, like, we don't care, right? I'm sure you
Yeah.
got black friends, you got white friends, you got brown friends, you got, like, whatever. You're just friends with people. You like people who you like. You get on with people who you don't get on with. Like, you don't care. You're not sitting there with some sort of, like, hierarchy sheet,
Yeah.
like,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
like, ranking your friends based on,
Their
just their
race or
privilege,
whatever. Yeah.
their
I mean.
privilege score. It's just like, no, these are my friends, whatever. Like, we
Yeah.
talk, we hang out, we do stuff, and that's where most people are. And so I think that's why the so-called silent majority need to push back on this stuff. Like, first, they need to be made aware, I guess, of how
Mm-hmm.
far it's gone, because I'm sure you'll even be privy to things that I'm not. I see how it creeps in. I'm in the music world. Like, the music world is very left
Yeah.
leaning.
Yeah.
You see how some of these ideas creep into the world of music, but in the world of education, I think there's a lot of stuff going on that I have some idea about, but you're in it, right? So you'll be able to see it more, and different people can kind of sound the alarm in different places. And I think people just need to be like, no, like, you know what? No, my daughter is not going to a class on white privilege. No,
Yeah.
right? You're not going to teach my son that he's really a girl, or that he could be a girl. You're not going to teach my daughter that she's really a boy. Like, no, right? Just draw the line. No, like, math, cool. Chemistry, cool. Physics, cool. History, cool. Right? All
Yeah.
good. White privilege, no. Critical race theory, no. And I think people just need to draw that line in the sand. And ultimately, it's kind of a free market thing. If enough people do that, then they kind of have no choice, really.
Yeah.
If they're running these classes and no one is there, then they're going to get dropped, right? If people start, if companies start trying to do these things and people, stand up against it, then they'll concede.
Yeah.
They'll concede. They'll. But the thing is, things have to be challenged. Bad ideas have to be challenged. People, I think, sometimes think you can just ignore them and they'll go away, but it's not like that. They have to be challenged. They do have to be confronted, and people do need to take an action to prevent them from seeping in and, I can't use that word. I was going to say parasitizing, I guess is the word. Infecting everything else.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is too, I've tried to look into the curriculums, and I think that, curriculums they should be open to the public at all times. You should be able to go to a school website, click on a page, and see the full curriculum. But I've even seen, whether it's Austin, Texas, or Denver, Colorado, I've looked and asked for both curriculums, or even Atlanta, Georgia, and they won't give it to me. So, yeah, I cannot see the curriculums. They won't let me see the curriculums. They make it very difficult for me to see the curriculums. In fact, I even wrote up a Freedom of Information Act request to Denver Public Schools to send me the full curriculum for everything. They're not doing it.
As in they're not responding, or they're outright saying that they won't?
They're stalling quite a bit.
Okay.
And it's clearly stalling because I've asked them multiple times, and then they say, oh, you can go to this page, and it's the curriculum resource guide, which they send me, and it has some of the books that they read in class, but that's it. So I asked them for the full curriculum. I've done it 3 times now. They won't do it. So that's a very interesting thing to see, for sure. And the fact that it should be open to the public, 100%.
Yeah, these are public schools as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a public school, it absolutely should be. Even if it's not a public school, I think it should be open at least. And even at a private school, it should certainly be open to the parents and anyone associated. But at a public school, yeah, I see no reason why that shouldn't be open and transparent. There shouldn't be anything to hide there.
Yeah. And I mean, I was going to Denver Public Schools. I was going to South High School just a couple months ago, and that's where there was the principal with the Black Lives Matter shirt and the teacher with the Black Lives Matter shirt. And since it was on virtual learning, we weren't actually learning very much. And then our science teacher stopped to talk about climate change. Our math teacher showed us a slideshow of her favorite politicians. I mean,
I take it the orange man wasn't on there.
No, it was AOC and the Obamas.
Yeah, of course.
And they did that. Then they had these programs at the school where it was like Black Student Alliance, Latino Student Alliance. They should have said Latinx because that's very bigoted of them.
I know, it's disgusting.
They had tons of those different things. They had an LGBTQ Student Alliance, which, they use all these fancy, nice words to say that they're doing good stuff, but really they just use it to indoctrinate kids further. And it's really terrible. And it's not only Robin DiAngelo that they're using in schools, it's also Ibram X. Kendi. Yep.
Of course.
I mean,
those two are the top race hustlers and grifters in America.
Yeah, they're making a lot of money, I bet.
I know. They're the ultimate race grifters. Like, they're the ones keeping racism on life support. They're doing everything they can.
Exactly.
To keep it alive as it tries to die.
And they're doing a good job of it because they're instilling it in kids now. I mean, how terrible is that?
Dude, I don't know what it... Do you know what it is? It's weird. I feel the same way with the UK, and it's interesting with me because I've grown up across different cultures, right? So
yeah.
My family background's originally Nigerian, and I grew up in Saudi Arabia, right? And people can criticize various countries for different reasons, but sometimes I feel like, certainly I feel this in the UK, but maybe to a degree in the USA as well, which is that, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but it's like people people tolerate too much. People are really tolerant in the wrong sense, and intolerant. They're intolerant in a bad way and tolerant in a bad way,
Yeah, I know what you
right?
mean.
So like, you're right. So like, there are certain, like, people tolerate too much nonsense, right? So
Mm-hmm.
someone should look at that white fragility book and just be like, what, this is garbage. Like, we're not, right? But instead, people are like, oh yeah, these are good ideas, and like, let's do
Yeah.
this. Like, let's give everything a fair. And it's like, no, this is trash, right? This is like the flat Earth of, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This is like the flat Earth of of sociology. Gender theory is the flat Earth of biology, right?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that your geography and physics teachers aren't there, teaching you about flat Earth, right? And
Oh.
so, and if they were, people would be laughing at them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
these people should be mocked because their ideas are so stupid, right? Doesn't mean you can't hear them. Like, listen to all ideas, but you don't need to take all ideas totally seriously,
Mm-hmm.
right? I can float out the idea that the sky is actually purple, and that the fact you think it's like blue or gray is all like, it's all a psyop, right? It's a
Yeah.
elitist,
Yeah.
globalist. It's a globalist psyop, and the
Yeah.
sky's actually purple, right?
Yeah.
I have a right to believe that, but people shouldn't be like, oh yeah, actually, yeah, the sky is purple, right? Like, it is, so
Yeah.
let's go and let's teach that to our kids and whatever. So people are like too tolerant of that kind of nonsense. But then, like I said, some people are intolerant of like things you should be tolerant of, which is various, reasonable political views, or people having different ideas on stuff, or
Mm-hmm.
people believing different things, whether it's religion or it's the role of government or this or that. Sure, people are going to disagree, but that's actual tolerance. Like, okay, cool. Like, we can all disagree on this stuff. I can be conservative, you can be liberal, this person can be libertarian, this person's Christian, this person's Jewish, this person's an atheist, whatever,
Yeah.
right? But we all tolerate each other, we all get on well, etc. Um, so I don't know. I think the West in particular, which is where these ideas are pervading, I think just need to be a little more vigilant, and like one, people are very critical of Saudi Arabia for, there are some obvious ways where I would say, some of the rules and laws and stuff in Saudi Arabia are too intolerant, right, and should be more liberalized. But with that said, they also do draw lines in the sand, right? They have certain things where it's like, no, we do not want this in our society and our culture. We don't accept this. This is not the way forward. This is not who we are. This is not what we do, right? But I think in the West, there's this sort of like identity crisis and guilt, which means sort of like there's all this self-flagellation. That's literally
Yeah.
what white privilege is, right? It's like it's just a left-wing version of white supremacy, but it's also like mired with this weird sense of like guilt, but also superiority, right? Because it's actually quite a white supremacist concept,
It
as far as
is.
I'm concerned,
Yeah. It is. I mean,
right? Like, it's still you're okay. So you think you're saying white people are inherently privileged slash
but
superior?
they call it anti-racist though. They're
Yeah, yeah, of course they do, because they're linguistic masters. But putting anti in front of something, again, people need to be willing to call this nonsense out, right?
yeah.
People just hear the word anti-racist and they're like, oh, okay, well, you know, it must be anti-racist. And it's like, no, don't be an idiot, right? People can label things whatever. I can
Yep.
run a terrorist organization and I could call it, don't kick babies, and then I could go around saying that anyone who opposes me, you want to kick babies? It's basically what BLM have done, right?
Yeah.
They've taken,
Yeah.
they've taken, the organization itself has taken a term that you can't disagree with. Like, everyone agrees with the notion that, yes, of course, black people's lives matter. Yes, agreed. Right?
Yeah.
No one was, but if you disagree with some of the aspects of the organization or the movement or their ideology, then they'll say, "Oh, well, you're racist. You're saying that black lives don't matter." And it's like, come on, man. Like, I'm not a 4-year-old, right? Like, I
Yeah.
like understand. You can understand linguistic tricks that people do, but a lot of people apparently can't, and they sort of fall for the propaganda. They just see what's on the tin, they read the label on the tin, and they're like, oh, okay, I mean, you
Yep.
could take a jar and fill it with snakes and write, cookies on the label, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, it must be
Right?
cookies.
Yeah, exactly. It
Yeah.
must be cookies, and it's like, oh, you get bitten, and then someone else comes along and they see someone's bitten, and the guy's like, oh no, it's actually snakes in there. And they're like, oh, but it says cookies, like it must be cookies. It's like, Come on, dude.
Yeah.
Like, use your brain, use critical thinking. More critical thinking, less critical theory.
The problem is too that less and less people are gonna be intolerant of these sort of things, especially when kids are being indoctrinated into it now. Because when I went to that private school that is almost 100% white, I had the most black family there. My grandpa's black, my aunt's half black. And then I went there, I stood up and I said, I don't believe that this exists. Then some very white Russian kid after school told me that I was defending white supremacy. And I don't think it's his fault for believing that. I mean,
Yeah,
we were in 8th grade. It's clearly the school's fault. It's the teachers. It's our own teachers uh, hurting us in this way.
sad, sad.
And it's just like you said, it's it's ridiculous. It's crazy.
It is, man. But dude, man, respect for you for being willing to take a stand on this, man. Like massive respect. There's people twice your age, three times your age, who are complete cowards about this. Complete cowards. They know that's wrong. They don't stand for it. They know it's wrong, but they have too much fear. They're too cowardly to do anything, to say anything, to even speak out against it. So you truly have my respect for being willing to have these type of conversations and to actually take action and to speak up and to defend your position and not just roll over when you know that something is wrong. When you know that something is wrong, you have to address it, because if you don't, that's how the worst things in the world happen. People
Yep.
see them, but they don't do anything, right? They're just like, oh, okay, that's kind of bad, but let me just pretend I didn't see it. Let me pretend I didn't notice that thing. And
Yep.
it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and then by the time maybe you really need to do something about it, it's a lot harder to. It's gathered so much momentum, um, and it's just hard, right? It's just hard. We're living in a very weird time right now, because for the past year, people have been going along with a lot of nonsense. So governments are pushing people harder and harder and harder, and they're making more rules and more restrictions. Like
Mhm.
the UK may as well be a dictatorship now. Literally, it's illegal for me to go outside unless I have a reasonable excuse.
Really?
Nobody enforced. Yeah, it's illegal. It's also illegal to leave the country.
Hmm. What
So,
about going to the gym? What is that like?
they've been shut for months.
So you can't even be
No, the gyms are
healthy.
all shut
You can't.
nationwide. No, nationwide, all the gyms are shut. All the shopping malls are shut. All the non-essential short stores are shut. People are not allowed to visit their friends or their family unless like they're in their so-called social bubbles. And it's been like that for months, man. They're now talking about people needing to get some sort of show their papers or documents to prove if they've taken the injection. What, dude? This is how tyranny happens. Literally, this is how tyranny happens. Like maybe in a good way, like you're living through this, because you get to see, like, you can read about it in history, but if you're anything like me, when you read history, it doesn't totally make sense, because it's just like, well, how did people go along with that? But it's like, well,
Yeah.
now
Yeah. Now
now
you
you're
can
seeing how
see.
people just go. Now you're seeing how people just go
Yeah.
along with things, because they don't think it's going to get to them, or they don't think it's that serious, or they're just like, it'll get better. Just ignore it, and it'll get better. And it's like, no, it won't get
It
better
won't
by
get better,
ignoring it.
no.
It'll get better by addressing it, and ultimately, the truth is, bad, you know, provided that you are allowed to still speak, good ideas topple bad ideas. That's the truth, right? So if someone wants to push some of these concepts at me, and they have, I know people who believe in white privilege and accept that mantra,
Hmm.
and sort of believe in some of these things, and it's like, you know, my arguments are better than, I've got better arguments than they do, right? It's often why they're so keen to deplatform and censor people, because the ideas do not really stand up very well to scrutiny, right? And if you have a good idea, you should welcome questions, right? If you have a good idea, like, you should be willing to debate it and discuss it, and you can defend that position. If you've got like a weak, a feeble idea, then those are the ones that you need to use censorship for, because you need to just you know that if a better idea confronts it, the better idea is going to beat it. So
Hmm.
instead, you'd rather silence that person or silence that viewpoint, etc. And so when people are trying to do that, again, sometimes people may think it's it comes from a good place, but ultimately, I believe that good ideas can always stand up to scrutiny. Certainly in the long run.
Yep. And I
Yeah.
I saw a lot of that, going to these schools, how even the teachers try to censor people.
Interesting.
So when
How so?
I
How? In what way?
I wore a "Make America Great Again" hat to school on
Okay.
Halloween as an experiment. So it was on Halloween.
Okay.
So a lot of people thought it was a joke,
Hmm.
but it was the one day where I could wear a hat to school,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm not even like a serious Trump person or anything. I think he's cool, but
Yeah.
So I wore it to school, and a lot of people thought it was a joke. And when I told people, "Oh, I'm not joking," I saw how just insane they went. And eventually, I ended up in language arts class with a very, very leftist teacher,
Hmm.
and everybody else, or there were two or three people wearing hats in the same class as me, and the same Russian kid that got upset at me uh, said, "Hey, Mister, could you tell Maxim to take the hat off?" And so then the teacher said, "Yeah, Maxim, you need to take your hat off." And I said, "There's other people wearing hats. It's Halloween. We can do this."
Yeah.
And then he was just quiet, but it just shows how the indoctrinated kids are working with the teachers to shut down other people.
Dissenting views. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, look. I mean, you're doing the right thing, man. Like I'm seriously impressed. You're 15.
Yes.
You're a sharp dude, man. Like you're a sharp dude. Like you really got my respect because trust me, man. Like most people 20 years your senior do not have a fraction of the testicular fortitude that you do. So honestly, man, like big up for standing up for yourself and not just letting these people bully you and roll you over into a little ball, or have you cowering in a corner. Because look, if you're not doing anything wrong, like everyone has a right to their people have rights to their opinions. Good ideas, bad ideas. They're obviously allowing people to voice terrible ideas, so you
Yeah.
need to be able to challenge them, right? If you have an idea, people have a right to challenge your idea. But ultimately, you can't discriminate against people. You got to apply the same rules. If they're going to have a rule saying, you know what, we don't want anyone to wear like stuff with political statements or slogans,
Yeah.
period.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, okay. No more Black Lives Matters t-shirts. No more Make America Great Again hats. Fair, cool.
Yeah.
Across the board, this is our policy. Got it, no problem. But if you're gonna, or you can say, okay, no hats. Period. Okay, cool, clear.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're like, okay, no, you can wear this one, but you can't wear that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
You can wear a Democrat T-shirt, but you can't wear a GOP T-shirt. It's like, no, that's just straight up discrimination. So that's where the lines need to be drawn, and people need to be called out if they're not being consistent on those things.
Yep. For sure. And then there's the other types of, well, this time racial discrimination in schools where they have affinity groups. Is what they call them.
Mm, yeah.
And uh, I've seen this. Actually, Tim Pool made a video on this topic a couple of days ago, and I first saw this at my sister's private school a couple months ago, where they segregate kids into groups on the basis of their race.
That's already a bad start.
Yeah, it's already a bad start.
That's already a really bad start right there. Yeah, carry on.
And then the way they get around not violating the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which states that you can't segregate people at all on the basis of their race, and I think their sex as well, is they call it a outside school program, even though they're doing it within the school. And by
Wow.
calling it that, then they get around the law, the Civil Rights Act of
This sounds like
1964.
a ripe lawsuit right
Yeah, I mean, it could be
here.
because
This sounds
they're,
like a ripe lawsuit.
I mean, that would look pretty bad. School segregates kids on the basis of their race. I mean,
That sounds like I'm like, I don't know the ins and outs, but I'm like, that sounds like a lawsuit for someone just
I
like, you need
mean,
to snap that up.
It's but it's turning kids into little racists, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's not good, man. It's not good at all. It's not good at all, you know. It's a step backwards. I think it's hilarious that the people who push this stuff call themselves progressives because,
Yeah.
you know, it's just, I'm like, there's nothing progressive about that. There's nothing liberal about it. Like, it's just, I don't even, I don't know. But I think, you know, all these terms that they need to label, that they like to label everyone else with, you know, it needs to be flung back at them, man. You know, if you're segregating school children based on their skin color and their ethnicity, then you are not anti-racist, my
You
friend.
no,
You are not
no.
the you know, you're not the one in the right there. So people need to be willing to, just like those people really like to label other people. It's like, okay, like let's switch that on you then. You know, like
Yep.
let's say, okay, you know, that's what you're doing. So yeah. Um, Sometimes you got to fight fire with water, but you know sometimes you got to fight fire with a little bit of fire as well. Again, just expose, just kind of expose it for what it is. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that works well with these type of things. You just expose it for what it is, and most people, majority of people, will just kind of see it and form their own judgment and be like, yeah, actually, yeah, that's a bad idea. Like maybe we shouldn't, you know.
Yeah.
Most people, I guarantee, most people in the USA or most people in America, in the UK, if you suggest to them that okay, maybe we should like uh, in school we should divide the children by like I think most people would be like
Yeah.
nah, like that's a bad idea. So all you have to do is expose it, just
Yep.
shine light on it, and people will be like, no, like we don't want that. That's not healthy. That's not positive. It's not good. It's not fair. It's not achieving whatever. Unless you're trying to achieve a destructive goal,
Yep.
it's not achieving any positive goal. But that's not making the kids better people. It's not making them feel more happy, more confident, more included, more cohesive. Like it's just creating animosity. It's creating literally creating division. Literally creating
Yeah.
division. So yeah, it's clearly not the way forward.
You just need to expose them like Project Veritas does. I mean, they do a good job of doing that stuff. I think that if they somehow did some stuff with education, that would be pretty cool. Um, I don't see them doing that, but it would be cool. You know how they exposed how Planned Parenthood was selling baby parts? I mean,
Yes,
eh,
yes.
I think almost everyone could look at that and go, that's pretty messed up. That's not good at all. It's
No,
like nobody wants to. I shouldn't say nobody. Clearly, some people want to segregate kids on the basis of their race, but
it's a tiny minority.
most parents don't want that. So,
No, most parents don't want that. Most kids don't want it either.
no.
But again, most people aren't aware of it. Like what we're talking about, if you told I think most people still, I don't think the majority of people would know this is going on, right? Like
Yeah.
we know it is because we keep up to date with what's going on in the culture and you know society and politics, and we see these little things popping up here and there. But you got to remember, you know, most people aren't active that much on YouTube, and they're not on Twitter, and they're not, you know, unless it's in the mainstream news, they don't they don't really pick up on it.
Yep.
Um, so especially if they're not in school, you know, like I'm not in school. I'm out of the school world. I'm out of the university world, but I have enough like links in there to see
Mm-hmm.
what's going on and to see how things are changing. I talk to people like yourself. I talk to people in the UK, in the USA, in Canada, etc. So I
Yeah.
can keep an eye on how things are shifting and what's going on. So the whole notion of racial segregation happening again in certain colleges, universities, schools, etc. That's not like mind blowing to me because it's like okay, I've
Mm-hmm.
seen that that's not happening. Whereas I think to the average person, uh, they'd be
Yeah.
like, wait, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yep.
that's not a thing. Come on, man. It's 2021. We don't do that.
Yeah.
And so you'd have to like convince them, like, no, like this is what they're actually doing.
Yep. And that's exactly why I've made so many videos of it because I'm just trying to convince people that this is what's going on, and it's, I mean, at very least, all across the United States, at very least. But some people still need it to be right at their front door until they realize
Yep.
it. Um,
Yeah, yeah. They
which
need to
is,
lose their job because they're white or something.
yeah, uh, yeah, I
I'm
mean,
not even joking. That's
it,
when it'll
yeah,
hit them, and they'll be like, "Oh wow, okay, this stuff is serious."
yeah. The fact that that is not a joke anymore is
No,
crazy, but also like you said, if you've been paying attention, not that crazy, compared to all the stuff we've seen. But I mean, yeah,
It's a strange world, man, but
it
you're
is.
doing the right